Good evening. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Monday, February 23rd meeting of the Bennington Select Board. We are at the third floor multi-purpose room at the Bennington Fire Facility on River Street. My name is Tom Haley. I have the honor of chairing this board. I will ask my fellow board members to introduce themselves now, starting with Nancy.
Hi, Nancy White.
Good evening, Sarah Perrin.
Hello, Jim Sullivan.
Good evening, my name is Jackie Matz.
Yes, good evening, folks. My name is Clark Adams.
And my name is Ed Woods.
Also with us this evening, we have Nancy Lively, who will take excellent minutes, I'm sure. We have Jonah Spivak, who's going to make sure all the AV runs properly, as well, presenting to us later. We have Town Manager Dan Monks, and we have Mike Cutler with us this evening from Cat TV. Special celebrity guest. We'll begin this evening, as we always do, with the Pledge of Allegiance. Clark, do you want to lead us, please?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. And Jim, would you please share our vision statement that guides our work?
Of course. Bennington is a welcoming, engaged, inclusive, resilient community where everyone, regardless of identity, shares in our vitality and benefits from an outstanding quality of life.
Thank you very much. Next, we have the consent agenda, which consists of the minutes of February 9th, the warrants, and the licenses. As Jim was not here for our last meeting, I'll suggest we take up the minutes first. So could I have a motion, please, to accept the minutes of February 9th?
Motion to accept the minutes of February 9th.
Second.
Thank you very much. Any discussion on the minutes? All right, very good.
I did have one thing. I apologize.
Jackie?
Page 11, line 387. It says we did agree to 2-hour meetings when we ran for select board. I think we did not agree to that.
What was the line number again?
387.
Yeah, I think that might have been perhaps an optimistic expectation. But I don't know if there was ever any formal agreement. So, yep. Anything else? All right, then. All those in favor of accepting the minutes as amended, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
And one abstention.
And one abstention. All right, on to the warrants and the licenses. Could I please have a motion to accept?
So moved.
Ed, thank you. Second?
Second.
Thanks, Jim. Any discussions on the warrants or the licenses? Nancy?
Page 1, 40, 50, 72. Bolio Propane Service. Senior Center Heater, $195. And then repair the heater at Bowen, must be Bowen Road, the garage.
That's correct.
$655.81. Is that a heater down at Catamount?
No, that's for our senior center building up Pleasant Street.
And what is the heater? Is it a portable heater?
No, it's poly. There's a propane heater system. Yeah.
That's correct. It's in the main multi-purpose room. It's one of the propane heaters in the corner. It was malfunctioning, so it was repaired.
Got to speak into your mic, sorry.
Sorry, in the senior center on Pleasant Street, it was in the multi-purpose room. It was one of the corner propane wall heaters. It was malfunctioning. It was repaired.
Okay. All right, thanks.
Tangentially related to Nancy's concerns, I thought we had transferred that building
Not until the end of the year when we take over Ben High.
Okay. That was my concern. Thank you.
Anything else?
On license, I have a question, if we haven't gotten to that yet.
No, we can, go ahead.
Hazara Food Mart. Pardon my ignorance, where is that, or what is that?
Sure, that's the former McGuire's or Mag's market on Route 7 South, on the corner of Crescent and South Street.
What number is that, please?
That's the license application.
Under licenses, Nancy.
Oh, okay.
So it's a gas station / market on the Route 7 South, right at the intersection of South Street and Crescent Boulevard.
Okay, is that a new facility or change of names? I just don't
No,
recognize
they've
it.
owned it for at least a couple years, if not
Okay.
more than that.
This is not their first time on this.
I see renewals, I just wasn't familiar with that
I
facility.
recognize the name from a period before.
Okay,
So it's-
all right.
I wouldn't have known the name, to be honest.
Yeah, it has no relationship to the actual name of the facility, so yeah.
Oh, okay, all right, thank you. That was my concern.
Anything else? All right, then all in favor of accepting the warrants and the licenses, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And any abstentions? All right, great. Next up, we have public comment. I had no one sign up for public comment this evening. Is there anyone here that wants to speak? Then I will skip the speech, and we will move on. I did get one public comment via email that I will be attaching. I will ask Nancy to attach to the minutes. All right.
Could you read that for us, please?
What's that? You want me to read the whole thing? Sure.
Or summarize, yeah, just, that's all.
It's, let me open my email. This was from Wendy Klein. And it's rendering content. There we go. She said, I'm here in my capacity as the leader of the Southwest Vermont Multiple Myeloma Support Group, respectfully asking the town of Bennington can illuminate the town office building and/or the Bennington Monument in red during the month of March 2026 in recognition of Multiple Myeloma Action Month. Then she goes into some background and various places they've done this, such as the Mayo Clinic in Phoenix, Nissan Stadium in Nashville, Symphony House in Philly, Bunker Hill Bridge in Boston, and she's suggesting that we use red Christmas lights. So I've written back to her, let her know that we had a couple more questions, and then we'll see where it can progress from there.
Invite her to come in.
Yeah. Yep. And I remember last year during town meeting, Mary Morrissey actually presented a proclamation.
Right.
So I have no idea if Mary has anything planned in that respect also. So I did get it. I will attach this full letter to the minutes, and I will follow up with her tomorrow after Dan and I have sat down and come up with all our questions that we have around how it would be, how it would work.
One, on that request, the monument.
I already told her that we have no authority over the
Yeah, I was confused.
And good luck.
Tom, doesn't that have to get approved by the state?
If it was at the monument, it would have to.
Okay.
So I already told her about that and
Okay.
suggested that might be a little more than she could bite off this year.
Not that we don't think it's a good idea.
Yeah. Oh, no, I'm not. I don't think it's a horrible idea. We just need to make sure we do everything properly. And
Could we attach all the emails that come to the board to the minutes?
we haven't in the past, no, but they are available if someone wants to put in a records request.
But I can't think of any we've gotten that wouldn't benefit the public to see.
They're available, though.
Yeah, they are available, and I do get some that are from folks with some personal stuff involved. And
Tom, if I could also make a comment.
Yeah.
The last board, and probably the board before that, opted not to accept public comment from someone who wasn't here.
Right.
So your reading of that email was a courtesy.
Yep.
We certainly can't take any action because we have questions and the person isn't here to answer them. But in theory, we were not accepting public comment without the actual person.
So if somebody sends us an email to the board, one of the last two we got, I thought was very important, so I should contact that person and have them come here, speak here publicly or call in?
I always recommend people come into public comment or request an accommodation.
And can we let people start calling in now that we have the system?
If they request the accommodation, we'll honor it.
We can't do it like COVID?
We can, it's just, if somebody asks, we set it up so that they can call.
But if our packet doesn't come out until Thursday and somebody doesn't see it until Friday, they might not have time to call ahead of time.
We accommodate any reasonable request, so I don't, if they,
I haven't heard of, have you heard of anyone that had a request denied?
Well, I tell people, don't email us because we never discuss it.
Well, I think that's bad advice too, but certainly if people want to contact us, they should certainly reach out to us. But yeah, you're correct. We can't discuss the individual emails amongst ourselves without reading them, having them before the board. And even during public comment, we really shouldn't engage in back and forth. But I think it's a valid point. Let's think of some way that we could maybe take a look at that. But I think the best choice is to invite people to come in.
Sorry. I was saying, I just want us to be consistent.
Yeah, I agree.
Could we somehow make sure the agenda could be published sooner than the packet itself so that the public would be able to go on the town website and see what the agenda for the upcoming meeting might be, so they may in fact request the accommodation for our hybrid meeting? Is that a possibility?
Yeah.
it changes sometimes right up to the last minute.
I understand. The only thing constant here is change.
Well, we have a sort of public-facing deadline of Thursdays to get your agenda items straightened out before Tom and Jim. Actually, Tom and Jim have already met with Dan, and then you're just waiting that day or two for loose ends to come together. So the problem was always timing.
Right.
Question for the chair?
Yep.
So I'm remembering this has been, I think this is my, 6th year now, it's coming up. So when we discuss 2 weeks in advance upcoming agenda, people will get a general idea of what our upcoming agenda is, so they could kind of get an idea if they want to attend a meeting in 2 weeks and put in for accommodations if they choose to.
That's true, but there are usually additions that happen after that point, but that does give a general idea, yeah. Yeah, I think so. I saw one more member of the public come in. Did you want to say anything during public comment? Okay.
But we have people, it would be very difficult for them to come to a meeting in the winter, such as seniors. People have limited mobility. I mean,
That's why we do allow, we will accommodate anyone who makes a request.
Go ahead, Jim.
Related to remote participation in the meetings, what's the status of our system? And
You used it last time?
You missed a beautiful thing.
You could have been here, Jim.
I could have used it remotely, but is that not going to be set up for all of our meetings so that people can participate remotely?
That's going to be a discussion probably for the new board to decide how they want to handle that.
Okay.
I thought there was a statute.
We should put on a future
All meetings had to be available from their hybrid.
Yeah, I think this should be, that's correct, they have to be available.
Tom, you see Jackie's hands up.
Jackie?
Just in terms of publishing the agenda, I think there's a statute that says, like, that we're required to give a certain amount of notice. I don't know.
48 hours.
So we're already doing more than that.
Twice the time, yeah.
Yeah, so.
More than twice, yeah.
Okay. All right, moving on. The long-awaited vacant property ordinance presentation. We've identified vacant properties as a problem that needs fixing, and Paul Dansero and Jonas Spivak have been working on some recommendations for us. And gentlemen, take it away.
Hello, how are you? I'm Jonas Spivak, Communications Coordinator for the Town of Bennington. I'm here today with Building Inspector and Fire Marshal Paul Dansero, which is two of the many hats he wears at the town office. Any other hats you'd like to mention? We've been asked to talk to you again today about vacant properties. This will sound familiar, as the issue of vacant properties was explored by the Charter Review Committee, and Paul and I presented on this subject just last October. We were asked at that time to make a recommendation for moving forward on this issue, and since then we've looked at other towns with vacant property ordinances. We've spoken with municipal officials in those towns, and we've met with staff internally to develop a recommendation, and this is the result of that work. If I can get my touchpad to work. So we're going to start by summarizing that presentation that we talked about in October. Then we'll include those recommendations for moving forward that we've determined, as well as next steps for the board to take. First thing we're going to do is we're going to start by talking about the negative effects of vacant properties, categorize them for you, discuss some of the possible reasons that some properties become or stay vacant, and finally, a brief overview of what tools we currently have to address that issue. And at the end, we'll discuss those recommendations for moving forward. It's a complex problem. Vacant properties can be an eyesore and a health and safety risk, and that much is obvious. What is less obvious is that some properties can be vacant for years and be a drag on the economic activity in our town. Indeed, some vacant properties are not obvious that they are even vacant. However, the impact on the grand list is obvious in a negative way. Paul.
And just to kind of simplify things in some specific categories, when we think of our vacant properties, we first want to maybe look at our downtown district commercial spaces and/or buildings. And then the next would be commercial spaces or buildings that are located outside of downtown districts. Then a third category would be residential dwellings or houses in foreclosure that are spread throughout town. And the last thing I'll just highlight, and it's not necessarily a specific category, but it could apply to any one of the three previous ones, is if you have a situation where there's no viable owners of record associated with any of the properties, which we'll talk about a little bit further as to why that's important to note.
There are a number of reasons why a vacant property can linger. It can be financial. For example, you can offset income from a profitable performing property against losses from an unproductive property. That is probably the case in a number of these properties that are commercial and vacant today. Needless to say, if there's no owner, that is a problem and a reason unto itself. Market conditions also play a role, as do the natural swings of supply and demand. Sometimes it's former locations of existing chains. And this is an interesting situation, as these properties are generally well-maintained, the taxes are paid, and there's no violations, but empty for a very long time. And examples of that, you think of the Friendly's restaurant, the Cumberland Farms, the old Cumberland Farms, or Burger King.
So we look at current tools that are available if we have situations with different vacant properties. The one to just highlight would be our Town of Bennington Article 30, which is our property maintenance ordinance. Some key points on that is the vacant properties are required to be registered and a local manager identified. There are no fees that are currently associated with this registry. The ordinance has very limited authorities over single-family owner-occupied homes, but probably, the last bullet there, the important piece is any enforcement action or procedures are very similar to what we would have to use or what we would utilize for building or zoning enforcement and require a court judgment or court order for actual enforcement. Town of Bennington Article 6 is the Housing Building Life Safety Ordinance. This is most often used to address any specific public buildings that are creating a building fire or life safety hazard in town. There's also the Town of Bennington Land Use Development Regulation. Those three are what we would look at as far as enforcing code and tools. The last bullet on there, town loans, would be an incentive program to actually incentivizing economic growth and development, which is another tool that could be used.
And one more.
Sorry, lost track. Within the current tools, though, it's important to highlight specific limitations to them. Any public buildings or commercial space that is not creating that public nuisance, fire, health, or safety hazard, it's limited on to what we could use to say there's violations or how to go about enforcement. Another one would be, as we addressed earlier, when there's no viable owners to associate with the property. Another way to state that would be no one to hold accountable for enforcement action, and moving forward, it makes it very challenging. A good example of that would be the situation of the 254 Benmont CTC building, where there has not been a viable owner since over 15 years. So it's hard to go forward on that. Now, the limitation, of course, is staff time or resources. Any enforcement actions that would be taken, with vacant properties, that also would detract, though, from any enforcement actions that would be taken from any property or fire, life safety, health hazards throughout town, or type of things. In other words, limited time, limited resources. We'd have to look at, prioritizing which enforcement actions we would be going forward with. And then the last part, which affects all of our enforcement, is just the length of judicial processes. And at the end of the day, no specific guarantees. There are maximum fines or fees that could be associated, that could be accumulated daily, but at the end of the day, it takes a judge's order and judgment, and it's not necessarily always the maximum amounts that would be awarded to it.
So as a result of those meetings and research, we do have some recommendations for moving forward. Number one, we suggest that we create a new ordinance rather than amending or attaching it to pre-existing ordinances. And that it be limited to the downtown zoning district, at least initially, to start, and specifically first floor street-facing spaces that are vacant. We also want to include some following key details. One is that adding a fee structure for vacant property registration in that district. And we will talk a little bit more about that, but that's the Brattleboro model, right? That was that article that sort of reignited this interest in this possibility. We also want to really hold local property owners to sign up a local property manager / owner / key holder, and that person being identified on that vacant property registry. That way we have someone to contact if there's a problem. And finally, a fine for violations to be up to $200 per day, which is the same amount allowed for fire and life safety. We also want to identify incentives to promote economic development. So a sort of a carrot and stick approach. And one example of that is using tax abatement strategies to incentivize landlords to do something. Also utilizing our revolving loan program, which has proven itself to be very successful in encouraging redevelopment. However, having said that, if we're going to be using it that way, we would probably also want to seek ways to increase the amount of funds available in that revolving loan fund.
Tom, could I ask just a clarification question?
Yeah.
When you speak of violations, what would be an example of a violation?
Not registering your building,
not
a property
registering.
manager.
Okay.
As well as not maintaining what, it's like similar within Article 30, there's requirements for having it secured, local property key holder identified, or property manager, key holder identified, the exterior conditions of the property to maintain minimal standards. So those would be the things that could be, if found in violation, that could be a violation.
Another way to think about it is this is the teeth to the ordinance. This is what gives us recourse to come back at someone for not following the ordinance.
Jonah, I just want to, I know Paul touched on it, and I know most people appreciate this here, but I think we really need to be clear that that's up to $200 per day, and I don't think there's a single instance that I can recall where the judge awarded even a fraction of that for any of the violations that we go for. So this sounds like a lot, but when the judge comes down and makes their decision, it's very rarely a significant amount, and often just barely covers our legal expenses, if that.
No, I concur. I mean, if you want to use a different example, that $200 a day violation could have been held for the Spring Street property that had the pile of garbage and so forth. What was awarded on that instance was $15 a day.
How much?
$15 a day was awarded.
And that was after the judgment was issued, not all the time before that it was in violation. Yeah.
And a key piece of this, of course, is that number 2, first line item, adding a fee structure for vacant property registry. And we're going to go into that with a little more depth on the next slide. So what we're proposing is that the year 1 permit fee, and this is a little different from that $200 violation thing, which is really controlled by whatever a judge may or may not apply. A permit fee is a little different. That is something that you, as town officials, have the right to set, and is a little stronger in court. Is that correct? So, for example, year 1, to register a vacant property, just $100. And I guess the feeling there is we want to give that first year for people in good faith who have a vacant property, give them time to do something with that property. Year 2, this is where it kicks in. $2,000 permit fee. Year 3, $4,000. Year 4, $8,000. Year 5, $16,000. And then each additional year, another $5,000 added to the previous year's fee. This would be due annually on a certain date. We would prorate permit registrations that come in at some portion of that year. Just a reminder, or for comparison purposes, the Brattleboro fee structure, that started at $1,000 the first year, so they didn't really give that grace period for that first year. And then they basically doubled it twice annually, and after the 4th year, it increased by $5,000 a year. But it is important to mention that as of our last contact with Brattleboro, in fact, they have had no enforcement actions under this ordinance. And also, they do have a waiver that the fees could be waived for a variety of criteria, including one that's just that you're making an effort to market it. What does that look like? So this is the Brattleboro fee structure as described previously. So the next steps, if the Select Board is interested in pursuing this further, would be to authorize staff, primarily Paul Dansero taking the lead with assistance from myself and other staff, to develop a proposed ordinance language and meet with stakeholders and downtown property owners and businesses for feedback. And then, after that process, come back to the Select Board for your reconsideration. And that's what we have for you on vacant properties. Your thoughts?
All right, thank you very much. I'm going to start on my left and work my way down. Ed, do you have one?
Yes, I have a question related to the downtown communication, and I love the fact that we're going to communicate. Do we think that we will be working with the BBC on that outreach in the downtown? Has that been thought through?
Yes.
Good.
You know, one of the things that popped in mind, you mentioned the various fees that these folks would be liable for, and then I roll back to the idea we want to expand our revolving loan fund. There's some consideration of where these fees can be designated to be deposited. I think this would be an excellent source to fund our efforts to address the revolving loan fund deficiency.
Yeah, so that is one possible use, but also keep in mind that we're adding a whole new regulatory category with existing staff and resources. So it may also make sense when you're thinking about that to maybe redirect some of that towards that enforcement cost as well.
Sure, I mean, it's reasonable, but if we get a couple of properties paying 16 grand a year in fees.
Yeah. That's real money.
Yeah, dollar here, dollar there, adds up. Yeah.
Good point. Yeah.
first, thanks for putting this together. I think this is great information, and I really appreciate the year one fee being low. I think that's a really important aspect of what you've put together here. You mentioned you were going to come back to what no viable owner means. Could you because it doesn't make sense to me that you could have a property that no one's responsible for.
Here's a good example where you have two good examples of no viable owners. Mentioned the 254 Bennington as a commercial space. CTC Corporation went defunct over 15 years ago. There's no one to associate any financial accountability or liability to.
Okay, yeah.
So if you try to do an enforcement action, we could go all the way, get a judgment. At the end of the day, though, it's still going to be the same result because there's not going to be an owner being held accountable that's going to correct it.
So what's the ultimate resolution then to get that property a viable owner? Is that a tax auction? Is that like...
That property has issues with contamination, so it's really not a property that an owner, that we would be able to identify an owner, including the town, that should take that on. It's unfortunately a very difficult situation, but we encounter that throughout town in some properties.
So it's not just that there's no viable owner, it's that there's like a serious problem with that property and no one wants to take responsibility for it.
Well, there is nobody to hold accountable.
Right.
It's not just they don't want to take responsibility, there's just no one, just like the Jard property, that corporation is defunct. All the original incorporators are dead. There's nobody to go after, and you know, that's the issue with that property and with the CTC property, and I'm assuming there's others.
Okay.
Another example I was going to offer to you, though, is also a different category, but a single-family owner kind of home. 118 Imperial Street, or Imperial Avenue. The owner of record, still the owner of record, who the deed's name is, walked away from the property now close to 8 years ago, and is not associated with it. The mortgage company and mortgage holder, has a, some kind of property management overseeing, but they still have not put the property in the mortgage holder's deed and name, so they're not the...
And why would they?
So if you start an enforcement action, they'll tell you, well, we're not the owner.
Yeah, but they've exercised control?
What's that?
They've exercised control over that property?
Yeah.
Kind of, yeah, they've been careful, sure.
Just the minimum.
Okay.
I know I've had conversations with Tom and other previous board members at different points on that specific property, so.
Okay, I don't want to go too far down that.
Those would be the two
question.
examples, though, I would say, why you're in a situation when you say there's no viable owner. It's, at the end of the day, who you holding accountable and responsible. If they're not there to do so, it just makes it very challenging.
Sure.
I just want to add a comment if I can. There's no viable owner. We get to a point where we're sort of stuck in our tracks, and then there's nobody that's responsible. What's going to happen to that CTC property on Benmont?
I know Dan and myself, Dan primarily has been engaging with State of Vermont Agency of Natural Resources. The key factor is the environmental liability. I won't speak more than that. I guess I know Dan has more of the details, but that's one big piece of the puzzle. If that is figured out, then that might generate what could be some next steps.
Yeah, so the biggest issue with the CTC property is if the town exercises any kind of control or accesses that property to demolish it or whatever, we would become liable for any environmental contamination. And because of joint and several liability on any kind of environmentally contaminated property, that means the town could be responsible for all of that liability because we're the only viable operator of that site. And before Stuart passed on, I told him I would tackle him if he took that property on, so I'd have to tackle him myself if I took that property on without getting some sort of liability protection from the state. And I've continued to engage with the A&R folks. The problem is that even if we successfully were to negotiate some sort of liability protection, depending upon what the state would require us to do with that property, it could cost anywhere from $250,000 to $500,000 just to stabilize it. So that's a very huge burden to put on the taxpayers who had no responsibility, no culpability with regard to that property. So it unfortunately is in limbo, and although we are attempting to come up with solutions. I know that about a year ago, we did write a memo to the board and unfortunately couldn't give you any good solutions, and I think they remain the same unless and until we can get some sort of liability from protection from the state. But even if we obtain that, then it would be a pretty big lift to spend that amount of money for a property that ultimately, even if it got cleaned up, would be worth maybe $50,000. So it's a conundrum for sure, and there are no easy solutions.
But Dan, what happened over the years? We know who owned CTC. How did it end up they no longer own CTC?
Well, the corporation still, quote unquote, owns it, but there's nobody that associated with that. There's no person or assets behind that corporation other than that contaminated property. So the only recourse is to lien the property, a property which is actually worth much less than zero.
But how could the owners walk away from the corporation?
It happens all the time.
They died in this case.
Yeah, this
Well,
particular.
but we knew about this issue when he was still alive.
But he had actually walked away from it and avoided any kind of liability many years before he passed away. We worked out the EPA on this. We worked with the state. We worked with our attorney. We worked with an attorney who specialized in this, and they all agreed that there was no viable party to seek compensation from.
And isn't somebody using part of the property?
This is why you...
That's a separate and distinct property.
Exactly, you want that. That's right.
So it's not the same building?
It's a separate property. Yeah.
Jim?
Thanks, Tom. I have 3 or 4 questions about... You're not done yet, Jackie?
No, you can come, and I'll come back to me.
Oh, well, I was going to say I've got 3 or 4, and I'll just do 2, and then it'll come back to me. I don't want to dominate. I'm hoping somebody else does, so I have to ask them. So first of all, just what was your thinking about restricting the ordinance to just the downtown zoning district and not other districts where there are commercial industrial properties?
Primary considerations would be twofold: time and resource constraints, and prioritizing where we think the most effective areas would be initially. Now, stating that, once this ordinance is adopted, or if it's created and adopted, as we go through it in the process, there's nothing stating that it could not expand to other zoning districts. So
Okay.
it might be something to consider.
I understand. I think personally, I realize the resource issue, but there's other commercial districts where vacant properties are, almost as problematic. And the second question I had was the fee collection. Somewhat aggressive for it, but you send a fee, an invoice to the vacant property owner, assuming you have a viable one, every year. Do you expect them to just pay that without any issue, or do other towns experience that there's a lot of? You talked about having to go to a judge to get, a fine paid, basically. What about these guys who say, I'm not going to pay a fee? Is there...
It's the same issue, Jim. We can't do anything without a judge.
You can't. So you can't even. You can send this, but it's not a valid invoice.
It's valid, but we have to get a court order in order to clean the property.
They can pay it voluntarily, quote unquote voluntarily. They're required to pay it, and they do. But if they don't,
we have to get a court order.
That would be, as you asked before, would be a violation by not paying it. That would be a violation of the ordinance. And
it goes right back to the same system.
Notice violation would be issued.
Thus the resource limitations that we have, Jim.
Yeah, I hear you on that. I just, some of those things are out there that are pretty glaring in other districts. Okay.
I think that we have obviously we have quite a few vacant properties. I'm just wondering what your thoughts are on this yourself. Do you see this as something that's enforceable and productive, or do you see this as more something that's going to take a lot of staff time and resources more than it's worth? And actually, do you think it will produce more income for the town? It doesn't seem like Brattleboro is doing great. That it's working for Brattleboro right now.
I'd say this, I don't think there's good precedent to say one way or the other. Look at the other towns, and it would be something where I would foresee, yes, quite a few enforceable action may be required, particularly if there's problematic owners. I think it would be something that we will have to prioritize based on locations and properties and just continue to chip away at it, but it would not be something where, instantaneously you're going to see, if you had 15, 16 non-compliant properties, of getting instantaneous results.
I'm concerned that this will be limited just to the downtown zone. Our area on Northside Drive has been the big driver of bringing shoppers to Bennington for 40 years. And I think there's a lot of places down there we should be aware of and maybe be focusing on. Does the Staples Plaza, is that in the downtown zone?
No.
It's not?
Staples is not.
And what year did Brattleboro start doing this?
Then I'd have to look at the date, Nancy. I think it was June or July of 25 is when they adopted their ordinance.
Oh, so they just started it then?
Correct.
I'm concerned on what it's going to cost with legal fees. But I wonder if there are people in Bennington who may have lived in other parts of the country who may be aware of something else we can try. I know a couple of people talked at meetings in the past. Did you talk to any other towns in the state and nobody else has anything they're doing?
We looked into, specifically I spoke with representatives in Brattleboro. We looked into the different ordinances in Rutland, Montpelier, and of course Montpelier is its own unique situation because they really don't have a vacant property issue because of the seat of government there type of thing, at least in their downtown.
We also looked at some other towns not in Vermont, but of similar size and composition.
And are we going to attempt to do anything? Is there anything we can do to stop properties, especially in the downtown, from being taken off the tax rolls? I'm aware of one the past couple of years was taken off. It paid taxes to the town probably for 100 years, as long as it was there. It's in the Downtown Improvement District. Now the BBC won't be getting that money either, so I'm just afraid how many more of their buildings in the downtown area are going to be taken off the tax rolls.
So that's not part of this discussion.
Yeah, that's, Nancy, actually, that's a very valid observation, I think. But unfortunately, not part of this.
It's an important issue, but just not something that this ordinance addresses.
Well, I think it's something. The board, the town, the BCRC, the BBC, and I think a lot of other towns.
I don't disagree with you, Nancy, but we do need to keep the conversation to
Okay,
this
well, we're
one
talking
thing.
about vacant buildings. If we have buildings that have had businesses for 100 years, and now the businesses won't be there, and the buildings are off the tax rolls, that's going to impact what we get.
Buildings aren't necessarily off the tax rolls if they're empty.
Right.
Huh?
Yeah, if they're not being used for a purpose that qualifies them to be off the tax rolls, that's something we can actually look at. And I would think possibly they would be covered under this ordinance if, I'm thinking of the pharmacy building.
Of what?
I'm thinking of the pharmacy building. There's nothing in there currently. I think that is in the district, if I'm not incorrect. And that would be, I would think, covered under this.
So if somebody is using the second or third floor, the bottom floor is empty, all they'll need to do is put a little sign up saying space for rent, and they're covered?
No, they actually have to rent it. It's a vacant property as long as it's vacant. So the only way to make it not vacant is to rent it.
Okay, so if, for the Putnam Block, for example, they haven't been able to rent out part of that space on the first floor, would they be looking at?
Yes.
Yeah, they would be covered under this.
Yeah, can I follow up on that?
Yeah.
Because that was number 3 on my list. If you know, because all these vacant properties are a concern. The ones that are really maddening are the ones where the owners really are making no effort to lease or the space or sell the property. They're just leaving them there and to rot. I feel a little bit for the property owner who is actively trying to market their space and can't do it. Is there any provision in these other ordinances for some kind of like a hardship provision if they've demonstrated that they've been listing it and people have looked at it, but they just no takers?
I mean, the Brattleboro ordinance, as it's written, has provisions in there where they potentially could waive fees based on if a property's actually being marketed. The Massachusetts ordinance that Jonah looked at also had provisions in there for
financial hardship.
Now, what I would offer is I would not recommend putting in a language that's very subjective. What is actually marketed?
It's been our experience.
So there's no way to really define.
Yeah.
How would you?
It's very easy to put a sign out front and say we're marketing it. We have instances where signs have been in the window and we've called the numbers and they won't respond for months and months on end. So
we could probably all quote a situation like that.
Yeah, I just don't think. I think you're just setting up an ordinance that will be completely ineffective if we give these sort of, outs that are difficult to disprove or prove, and I just think we need to have a bright line rule. That's why we're saying $100 the first year, and we're not even really going to hit you hard the second year. But I don't think that I would not recommend that we adopt an ordinance that has those kind of caveats because we won't be doing it. We won't be making any changes. It won't be effective.
I think I agree with that, especially like if you think about then like breaking it down to like how much are you asking in rent? Like are you asking like $10 a square foot or $1,000 a square foot? Like that makes a big difference too, so vacant is vacant.
Right. I mean, the one consideration that would be to change a category from vacant property to something else would be if an owner submitted a building permit and was doing a renovation, remodel.
Because then there's activity happening in the space.
And it would have to be, and it would actually be active, active construction or active improvement of property. That would take it out of the category.
Right. Paul, can you, maybe, I don't necessarily need an exact answer, but how many properties are currently on the vacant property registry?
I don't have a good answer for you on that.
Okay.
The honest answer would be also, right now, there's not an effective registry in place that has a 1 to 100 list,
Okay.
But that's what this ordinance would start to work towards involve. It would also work to involve, just even under the Article 30, no fee structure associated, but being more active on that registry.
Are you able to sort of estimate how many properties would be subject to this ordinance in the downtown? Are we talking, there's the ones that we kind of all can see, right? But
yeah, I think
that is really
probably
what we're talking about. Because we're suggesting limiting it to first floor street-facing spaces. So
in the downtown.
In the downtown.
Right, right. Okay.
Ed, I saw your hand.
Thank you. So who's going to be the enforcement arm of this? Is this the Board of Civil Authority or is it the building? Who's responsible for arbitrating?
Our department, being Bridget and myself.
So you wouldn't go before the Board of Civil Authority like a tax abatement application does?
I don't see that.
But again, the enforcement is all through the courts. They do the violation letter, but then ultimately it goes to the courts.
What I'd look at and I'll work with Dan and our attorneys, of course, what would be the appeal process, but would be whatever this, I'd imagine be the same as what's in our Article 30. Off the top of my head, though, I'm not able to quote what that appeal process would be. And
are we faced with these long redemption periods like we are with unpaid taxes?
There aren't like legal redemption periods. It's just, let's just go through a typical scenario. We try to get involuntary enforcement through letters, et cetera. It doesn't happen. We file a notice of violation. They don't respond. We then file a complaint in court. It takes 6 months to a year to get a court date. We may then hopefully get a judgment. Then that judgment we have to perfect that as a lien on the property, and then we would have to foreclose on that lien. So if you have an owner that truly doesn't want to comply, it can be a long road, but I always say, unless you start, you're not going to finish, right? So we have to start somewhere to get these properties, into active use, and if it takes 2-3 years, it's better than not doing anything.
You mentioned fire alarms, burglar alarms, that sort of thing to secure the properties. Is there anything that could be included to make sure they're doing like the physical upkeep of the property? I mean, people are complaining constantly just about the dirty windows on Main Street in these vacant buildings. It's little simple things like that that really do have an effect on how people perceive our downtown as they're walking down the street. If they're looking at a filthy window with obscene pictures drawn on it and so forth. I mean, is there anything in those lines that are either already covered in existing stuff or
Not to the level of dirty windows, I'd say. I mean, there's stuff exterior buildings within the Article 30, they must be, does it peel and chip paint? Is it weather tight? Is it, is it properly secured, door secured, locked, windows locked, secured? As far as cleanliness of the building, I don't think there's any language at this time that goes to that level. But.
Because what I'm seeing on a lot of this is that we're trying to target that financial incentive, those savings from, tax write-offs and so forth. If we can eliminate that possibility, they're definitely more incentivized, I would think, to actually rent the property and get some income coming in. That's what I'm seeing this as being a tool to achieve that goal. So I'm honestly, at this point, we've had some of these properties vacant for so long that I'm out of excuses for these folks. And everything we can do that would cost them money, I'm for right now, because it's detrimental to our whole downtown to have this many vacant storefronts, because it's just, you never know. If someone's going downtown to one store, they might go to 3 or 4 other stores, and that's the kind of thing we need to include. But if they have to walk through past 5 empty storefronts, that's a whole nother animal, Clark.
I keep hearing the theme of litigation, going back to litigation and costs associated. One of the things that I'm wondering if in this ordinance we can't put some provision where should the landowner or the property owner be found responsible, that they're responsible for our legal expenses too.
So Clark, we always make that request to the judge.
I mean, like that, in the actual ordinance itself.
The problem is we can't legislate that. That is a judge's discretionary decision. We always ask for it. We don't always get it, but.
Or can we just communicate that, in fact, we will pursue our legal expenses to address this problem?
We can certainly say that any complaint that we file would include a request for legal fees, but we can't mandate that they pay them.
Well, I understand that, but I think, document in our policy that that's what will happen. There'll be no doubt in a person's mind that that's an additional risk that they're running by bucking us.
So Jim, then Ed.
Thank you.
Yes, this is just a question, wondering if you've given any thought to this scenario. Given that a number of these, not all of them, but a number of these property owners are notoriously unresponsive or disinterested in a way, what about the thought that it's a fairly aggressive fee structure over time? And given the mindset of some of these people, they might be inclined to just ignore these things, and they would pile up over time. And by the time it got to court, it would be so much money that maybe the property owner would basically just declare bankruptcy, and then we would wind up with a vacant property with no viable owner.
And we did them a favor. We helped them out.
Well, I would say most properties do have some intrinsic value, and if that means that we could then sell it at a tax sale to a new owner that would do something with the property, that would probably be a win.
Yeah, I was thinking about the same expectation. We have to set an expectation that's realistic for this. and I'm not sure what that is, but one of the downsides of collecting at a tax sale is that the buyer has to wait a year before they can do anything with that property. And unless you're just buying up foreclosed properties or blighted properties as an investment, if it's going to cost me a ton of money, and I have to wait, why would I make a bid on a tax sale?
So we would not be going to tax sale if we were to be successful in litigation and then file a lien. It would be a foreclosure, and there is not that redemption period associated with it. Actually, one of the issues is if we could go to tax sale on these properties, we would. They're paying their taxes. They're just not doing anything with their properties.
So you got nothing there, right?
So that's why we need to find another tool to, incentivize folks to rent their properties. I will say that, and I've been surprised by this, but the folks that we've talked to, and we haven't talked to a lot of people, but we've talked to a few people, a couple of people in the downtown, and they said that, they don't think the problem is that there aren't people willing to rent the property. The problem is with the landlords unwilling to speak with people to rent those properties.
Some of us know that
Yeah.
to be true because we've made the calls as a potential renter. And I've gotten you're not interested, you can't afford it, we're not ready to lease it yet.
We've talked to at least 2 or 3 very active real estate brokers who have tried desperately to contact several of these downtown property owners, and they're unwilling to discuss any option, either lease or purchase of their property. And that's their prerogative, but I think we need to say, okay, that has an impact on our community, and we need to recognize that, and they need to compensate the community for their failure to renovate and rent their properties.
I mean, we won't know until we go forward, but if we charge somebody the $1,000 and the $2,000 and they don't pay and it goes to court, I don't know, does anybody really think a Vermont judge is going to side with the town against the property owner?
We have discussed that with our attorney, and she believes that it is likely that we'd be successful. Again, it's the cost and the time and the effort to get there, but we've had that discussion, and we wouldn't have proposed this if we didn't think we'd have a likelihood of success in litigation.
But what is the difference between this and the abandoned property? I mean, what he said the town was able to get on Spring Street, that was such a dump for 6 or 7 years.
So we don't have it. We're not under any illusion that the $200 per day fine is likely to be recovered to the full extent. But according to our counsel, these permit fees are much more likely to be recovered. Again, even that is not a lot of money if you talk about what it could be for the per day violations, but at least we're likely to, that's a floor that we're likely to see.
Sarah?
Yeah, I think I just got my question answered. I was going to mention that we asked for this vacant properties presentation, and it just seemed like the recommendation from town staff was that we proceed in this. Is that correct?
Yeah, so we think that it's definitely worth proceeding. We would like to focus it on a specific area. If you don't think the downtown is the correct area, we will do whatever the select board would like us to focus on, but we do think that's the area that most of the folks in town find most objectionable, is those vacant properties downtown. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that we have the resources to do anything beyond that. I think even that will stretch us thin. But if we prioritize and focus on the worst properties first and really try to see how this works and how the courts deal with it, then I think it's worth the try. We haven't been successful to date with other efforts. I think we need to keep trying and see what works and continue to push forward on the issue.
I think we've learned very well what doesn't work.
Yes.
So,
Yeah, I feel like you've done an awesome job with the last properties that you worked on. Do you feel like this needs to be narrow in order to work on other properties?
I'm sorry, say again?
The last properties that you've dealt with that we saw that were pretty blighted, do you feel this needs to be narrower to focus on properties such as that?
This doesn't really address blighted properties.
Correct, yes. I'll just reword that. Do you feel that this needs to be narrowed to address blighted properties and this?
Well, go ahead.
Sorry. Right, I mean, focusing on the downtown district only, for this particular instance and efforts, realistically, okay, that could be, prioritize 2 to 4 enforcement actions that will invariably have to go forward with. 2 to 4, we could manage that and still manage other enforcements in town, if that's what you're asking. So if there's somewhere outside of downtown district that's a violation, causing a public health hazard that needs to be enforced, I think we still have some capability to do that. If we go beyond, a 2 or 4 per year, focused enforcement, it could deter from some others. We'd have to prioritize which ones.
Okay, thank you.
Jackie, I saw you.
Thanks. So we've talked a little bit about a number of these properties that clearly have been vacant for several years already, for whatever reason. The fee structure that you're proposing, while I appreciate that it starts at that very low level, I wonder if is there potential to structure the ordinance so that it would be based on the amount of time a property has been vacant versus the amount of time that they're listed on the registry, so that, as we begin here, a property that's been vacant for 3 years already would start out at that higher fee?
What I think is important would be the ordinance would have to say, okay, as of, arbitrary date, 1 April, staff would have to determine, okay, here's the list of vacant properties in the downtown district. And then, okay, arbitrary date, 30 April, owners have to have that registered and pay registration permit fee. If you don't have that established, then there's no way to set the clock to say, okay, as of this date, it was determined vacant.
So there's no way for it to be like retroactive?
I would not see an effective
I think it would be
way to make
difficult to prove that in court.
Okay.
Yeah, as much as I'd love to say, okay, well, if you're 5 years, it's been 5 years vacant, we're going to prioritize you and you're going to have a much higher. I just think we're setting ourselves up for a very difficult court case.
Okay.
So basically, it just sets the clock, and then, okay, that would start the date, and then, 5 years from now, or if it was adopted, 5 years from the adoption date, that property is still vacant, okay, then it'll catch up to it at that point.
Okay, yeah.
I think and I said this before, I think it's really important that we set the correct expectation for this, because we don't want to have just another reason to chase a landlord and knowing that we probably can't get anywhere with it. So is the expectation realistic enough to make an enforceable policy? And that's what I think you guys have to figure out. It's got to be enforceable, and it's got to be, you got to have teeth. And I don't know, the only thing that we have is money, or the threat of a lien. It's all we have. But think about the landlords that we're probably all thinking about in the back of their heads. I'm not running to you to pay $4,000 because it's been 3 years already, and I'm not doing anything with it. I'm going to pay $4,000 more. That's, you know what I mean?
Nancy?
If we're going to do this, I would question why we'd start the first year at $100 and not just go right in at $1,000.
So that's really up to you folks. We don't have a strong opinion about that. If you folks think it needs to be higher to start off with, we're happy to do that. I will say that we do see this as a work in progress. Even after we bring it to you and we adopt it, if we see things that need to be changed, we're going to be back to you and say, hey, this fee structure is not working, we need to change this. Or here's what we litigated this particular issue, and this is what we found out. We need to tweak the ordinance to do this. And I think that this is going to be an ongoing effort that we will have to, it's going to be measured in years and not months. But most of these problem properties have been an issue for over a decade. So we need to make a concerted effort to address them.
agreed on the time that this has been an issue, and to Ed's point, if there was an easy solution, somebody probably would have effected it already. So, this is a reasonable approach, I think, to a challenging problem, and I think we may even find out or something we already know, but in the next presentation, that this is a really significant concern amongst a lot of community members, and they really have an expectation that we do something about this. So I would favor having the staff go ahead and develop this parameters that you've developed and turn it into an ordinance for our review.
Yeah, I agree, and I think I had a constituent last week send me a link to an article from Channel 10 in Albany talking about, I want to say it was, I just tried to find it, but I turned my phone off during the meetings for the Wi-Fi. But I think it was Colony. I'm not 100%, but they were looking at doing something very similar to this. It was actually,
Cohoes.
I think, was it Cohoes?
Yeah, I tried to find out. I read that article and tried to forward it to you, but it didn't work.
And that sounded actually even a little more aggressive than this. And I did speak with someone that was visiting town this past weekend that said their town out in western New York had similar issues, and that they initiated something along these lines and had been successful. So I think it's a problem with a lot of communities around it, and so we're looking at a new way of attacking it, and I think we're actually in line with a lot of what a lot of other towns in the area and across the country probably are thinking about doing. So I would favor also seeing something written up that we could actually get into. Right now we're just kind of talking about what ifs, and if we actually had an ordinance to look at, then we could actually get into the meat of it, I think.
Do you need a motion, or?
I think if there's just consensus of the board to allow our team to go ahead and draft an ordinance first to bring around and talk with stakeholders about, and then bring to this board, that would be all we need. We don't need a formal motion. You'll need to make a formal motion to adopt the ordinance, but that's a few weeks away.
Yeah, I agree. How long do you think this process might take?
What were we talking about, Jonah? 90 days on the outset?
That should be
on
safe.
the outside, yeah. Because we do want to engage the property owners and the business owners and the public, so that when we come to you, we've had the opportunity to talk to the folks that will be most impacted by this.
Yeah, I mean, if they have a legitimate reason, then we should hear it. But right now, it looks like from just walking down Main Street that there's a bunch of vacant properties, and I know I've talked to people that wanted to rent them. So
I have one now that I'm trying to communicate with the owner to help a business get into a space, and it's frustrating. The 90-day time frame feels like maybe it would line up nicely with a topic for a listening session too.
Yeah.
Did you have something else?
Oh, you guys covered it.
Tom, I just had one more thing I'd like to say about this, because we've been talking about, being aggressive in enforcement, but I also like to hope, because sometimes I'm optimistic, not all the time, but I like to hope that this would maybe make some of these landlords pay attention to their properties and maybe come talk to Shannon and et cetera, to see if there is ways that we can partner with them to get their properties out there and let folks know that they're available. I think a lot of these folks, they own a huge portfolio of properties, and this is just one that they don't think about. And maybe this is a property in Bennington, they're like, oh, I need to pay attention to this one now. How do I deal with this? And so I'd like to hope that this spurs at least some landlords to be more proactive and work with us, because we would prefer not to fine people. We prefer that people rent their properties. That's the ultimate goal for us. So I would like the message to go out to landlords that if you really do want to rent your properties or sell your properties, we would help you. We would facilitate that effort and connect you with folks that are interested in your property. So.
It's well said, I think. So does anyone have any objection to them bringing us back something that we can actually get into and talk about.
Is anybody interested in starting at 1,000 rather than 100?
I think that's something we can look at once they draw up the ordinance, and then we can discuss that in more detail at that point.
Well, just if they're going to be talking to business owners and others.
Well, they could
Tom, I
certainly
got
bring
one more question, and then
Go ahead, Ed.
I want to get off this topic I think we're ready. I think you have to go back and look at how many properties are out there. What do we know about the landlords? Put that against this fee structure, and then you'll see if this has teeth or not. So that would be my strong recommendation.
Fair. All right, well, thank you very much. I'm sorry, did anyone in the community have any questions? Okay, great, thank you. Thanks, guys. Jonah, stay right there.
Yes.
Next on our agenda is Jonah again with our community survey results.
I guess I don't need to introduce myself again, so I'll hold off from that. I'm pleased to present the results from our 2025 community survey. The 2021 survey was actually one of the first projects that I did as the new communications coordinator, so it's been very interesting and useful for me to now be involved in what is the third survey under my tenure. So that makes it our fifth total, and we did pretty well with our numbers for this year. We had 961 folks taking the survey. We continue to use a 5-point matrix called a Likert scale, which is a more scientific method for doing surveys. We've been improving this process every time we've done it. This year, we kept the questions the same as last year with some minor modifications, which is great for seeing trends that we'll talk about today. And we did work very hard to get the word out. We did a lot of advertising. We had physical locations where they could be picked up, and we also advertised in the banner as well as on social media. You know, we will sometimes show something called weighted results, and that is a way to average results other than just showing percentages, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that later when it emerges in the presentation. So we'll start with demographic information. We asked, what is your age? And overall, it was very similar in the spread to 2023. We did see continued strong outreach in our youth numbers, but we did see a slight decrease in the 19 to 29 age group. This is a tough one to reach. Of course, using Instagram, they're no longer using Facebook, so figuring out ways to reach that demographic is always a challenge. All the other categories were pretty similar to last time, with a small decrease in the 30 to 39 range and a few more in that 50 to 64 range. We then asked, what is your relationship to Bennington? And this is an important one because we want to know, are the people taking this survey, are they Bennington residents? Do they work here? Do they live and work here? Or are they not? Are they just tourists? And in fact, 83% live and work here. That's a little bit less than in 23. We had 85% in 2023. If you do the math, that works out to about 1 out of every 19 residents. So if you're in a room with 18 other folks, one of you took the survey, at least statistically speaking. 12% work here but don't live here, but that's still an important group to hear from, right? They do have a stake in our community. Just 4% were none of the above. Didn't live here, didn't work here, et cetera. Just visitors, perhaps. That's the same as last time. We then asked, do you rent or own your own home? And this year, you know, it's funny, this year we sent the survey, or I should say last year, this is 25, we sent the survey to all the large landlords in town. We requested that they share the survey with their tenants. We also shared it with organizational partners such as Sunrise or the Bennington Housing Authority and others to share with their networks to try to capture that elusive renter market. Because in fact, the the respondents who were renters decreased in 25 from 24% to just 19%, which is not great because 44% of the overall population does rent, and we want to hear from those folks. So this is our second time asking this question. As you heard at the start of every meeting, we start by reading the town vision. And last year, we really wanted to get a sense of how much that resonated with the community as a whole. And indeed, last year, we had almost a perfect bell curve in terms of people describing how much they liked or didn't like that town vision. And we still have a pretty nice bell curve this year. But there are increases on the positive side. Agree and strongly agree increased by 3.5 and 2.5 points respectively. Okay, this is a tough slide, right? This is a big matrix of numbers. And this is where that Likert scale formula calculation that I mentioned at the outset comes into play. So what we'll do is we'll look at the top percentages for each column, and then I'll try to explain how those weighted averages come into play to give us a better way of understanding them. So for example, the stars that you see, the 2 red stars, the green star, and then the 2 yellow stars, that's the largest number of each column, okay? So the way the formula works is you take, you assign numerical values to all those response options. So very poor would be a 1, poor 2, neutral 3, good, very good 4, and 5 respectively. Then you count the number of respondents in each of those categories. You multiply them together, then add all the results and divide it by the number of respondents. Clear? Clear as mud, right? But what it does is it ends up giving you this weighted average. So for example, even though you have lots of people in the poor or the very poor category for street repair, overall, they're actually doing pretty well, right? And that's one of the ways that you can use these Likert averages to get a better sense of what this means versus just a straight percentage. Thankfully, we also have these graphs, which are a little easier to understand. And this is that same data as that matrix that you saw before. And one way to look at this is if you look at that gold line in the middle, that's your neutral line. Things to the left of that, that's your dark green and your dark blue. Those are your very poor, and everything to the right of that gold bar is your good and very good categories. So what you can see is that in general, we're actually doing really well. The majority of folks are rating us, and this is where I'll go back to that prior slide. All of these ratings are the lowest one here, 3.08, that is still in the high neutral category. Most of these, let's see, 9 of these categories were in the good to very good category, and just 6 were in the high neutral, nothing below that. So these are actually stellar results. But again, kind of hard to read from this, so we have this nice graphic here. And again, if you look at this, just look at how strong everything to the right of those gold bars are, and even how tall the gold bars are. That's a good visual way to see how well we're doing. And I think there was one other detail. Let's see. Oh, in 2023, those 2 lowest categories was programs and activities for youth. This year, it was street repair, just by a couple of fractions of a percentage. And I think that's in part because we had some major road renovation projects. We totally redid Gage Street. We totally redid Silver Street. So I think that might have had an effect to bump that up a little bit. By the way, snow removal is always in the top for the good category, as it was in this survey. And even higher than that is our police and fire services. So this is again that slide we just looked at. I'm going to flip right by this one. And I'm going to hit you with another one of these matrices. but I'm just going to point out a couple of interesting things about this. So the question is, how many times have you visited the following parks? And this is an important one for staff. We want to get a sense of how much folks are using these different facilities that we maintain and offer. Number one, no surprise, that's Willow Park. My goodness, it's the most visited and the most well-known park out there, so no surprise. Least used, that's Beach Street, and that's the ballpark over on Beach Street. And the least known, that is the Y Woods. And interestingly, these results are the exact same as in 2023. So here's a visual for that. This is, again, that same question, how many times have you visited the parks? And this is kind of a useful way to look at it. That green bar on the left, that means 0. Those are the people that reported 0 visits. And then that orange bar on the far right, those are the people that don't even know it exists. So those bars in between give us that visual of how popular and well-used these different facilities are. And of course, there's Willow Park, the 4th bar down, and it's nice and clear. You can see the impact and the use that that is getting. We asked the question, please rate how safe you feel in your neighborhood and the town as a whole. We did split that because we wanted to kind of weed out the, maybe let's call it the bad news effect. You hear bad news, and you're like, everything's going wrong, I feel terrible, I'm feeling really concerned, the town's going to heck. It's not going to heck, by the way. But if you feel that way, one way to balance it is to ask people, well, how do you feel in your neighborhood, on your street? And that can be a way to mitigate that. And the good news is that people's feelings about safety have really improved since 2023. Over 2/3 of people feel safe or very safe in their neighborhoods. That's an increase of 5% over last time. And perhaps even more importantly, overall feeling of safety in town as a whole also increased by almost 10%. So that's very encouraging. We asked, please rate the performance of the Bennington Police Department. Performance ratings for the police department have continued to improve. Over 51% rated the department as good or very good across all categories, with the highest being approachable with 67%, which is impressive. All of the scores for the police department have weighted averages in that good range of 3.41 or above. This was our Community Policing Advisory Board question. They submitted that to us initially in 2023, and we repeated it in 2025. And in fact, we had very similar results to 2023. We also had quite a few comments, 209 comments. And we do read all of those comments, and they're shared with both the police department as well as the CPARP. Occasionally, there's little tidbits, golden nuggets, if you will, of information from folks that have thoughts or questions or suggestions that end up being a future Facebook post for the town. Because when we realized that there's something that people weren't understanding or getting wrong, we wanted to be able to correct that. Speaking of comments, we do have a question after this that was just a comment question, and it said, what can the community do to help the BPD, the Bennington Police Department, to do their job more effectively? And we did receive over 500 comments for that, which we were sharing with the police department and CPARP. We asked, what features would improve the vibrancy of downtown? Check all that apply. Number one is and always has been more retail businesses, and that's at 51%, but only by a tiny margin over housing, which has increased from 47% to 50%. Number two, followed by restaurants, which was an increase from 2023. Outdoor recreation or gathering spaces remained basically the same at 40%. People are the least interested in seeing more service businesses downtown, and that's, for example, finance, insurance, real estate. We did also have 406 comments in that category with suggestions and ideas for what folks would like to see downtown. Now, here's an interesting one. What municipal investment would have the greatest impact on the community? And we refer to this a lot. And let's look at these top 4. In 2021, redeveloping vacant and blighted properties, number 1. And in fact, it's number 1 in 2021, 2023, and again this year in 2025. Facilitating a downtown food market was number 2 in 2021, but since we got a food market, we actually took that off the list. And then in 2023, and then the other things that facilitating new and restored housing and additional bike and pedestrian pathways, those 3 have remained the top 4 every time we run this survey. But what has changed is that, like I said, in 2021, downtown food market was number 2. We took that out. And then in 2023, the top one was an indoor gymnasium. But since we now have that coming also, we took that out. And then in 2025, we added outdoor synthetic ice rink, which shot into our number 4 spot. But that's kind of interesting. So we keep identifying things that the community really wants to see and then getting them done, and they get to come off the list and new things emerge. So that has been an interesting thing to see happen over time. Now, this one, to be clear, what investment in non-municipal assets do you feel are most needed? In this category, quality housing stayed in that number 1 slot and increased 5%. So we're seeing a trend, right? That desire for housing, we're clearly seeing that over and over. Availability of health care stayed in the number 2 and actually increased also by 2%. Access to healthy and affordable food remained in number 3 spot, but saw a decrease of 3%. Number 4, now that has changed from kindergarten to 6 education in 2023 to 7 to 12, grade 7 to 12 education in 2025. But both categories saw a 10% drop, which is interesting. This 10% decrease also applied to the availability of childcare services. We do wonder in 2027, when we do this again, whether or not we should be asking about non-municipal services. Because while it's an interesting data point, and we've carried it through because it's always been present in our surveys, we do wonder the value of asking something like that when we don't really have control over it. But that's something we'll be looking for feedback from you guys on. We asked, please rate your overall quality of life in Bennington. And this year, 2025, I should say, we got to 69, which is an increase of 3 points. We've been steadily going up over the last 3 surveys, which is the optimistic way of looking at it. And the less optimistic way is to note that we're almost back to where we were in 2016. Just 1 point off from that. We asked, please rate the performance of the Bennington Select Board. And Select Board performance ratings increased in 2023 over prior surveys, and the approval continued to increase in 2025, with neutral increasing slightly as well. Overall, the number of folks rating the board at good and very good has equaled and even surpassed those rating them as very poor and poor. So yeah, good improvement. This is always one of interest to me. What is the best way for the town of Bennington to share information with you? In 2023, social media was increasing at 64%. Newspapers were down at 33%. The website was 40% down from the prior year. Public access TV, 15%. Front Porch Forum, 20%. In 2025, social media continued to grow, but at a much slower pace, just adding 1% to get to 65%. The newspaper notices dropped down to 28%. Meanwhile, the town's website increased to 45%, which I was happy to see. Public access TV remained the same at 15%, and the Front Porch Forum, we saw an increase there, getting up to 25%. We asked, please rate the following aspects of the town of Bennington staff. And there's a number of categories, as you can see. In 2023, the good, very good category was 52 to 62%. That increased in 2025 to 56 to 66%. And again, just thinking of that gold bar being neutral, and then the things to the right of that being good and very good, this is impressive. So we really appreciate the support that the citizens have had for town staff in doing the work for them. In fact, the lowest weighted average for this was, all of those categories, was 3.66 in that Likert scale, which is pretty extraordinary. We then asked, thinking broadly, in the future, how do you feel about the town in general over the next couple of years? In 2023, 37% optimistic, 30% indifferent, 33% pessimistic. In 2025, that increased to 43% optimistic, 35% indifferent, and just 22% pessimistic. So that's really a nice trend to be looking at. So all of the town surveys are available on the town's website, including all those comments that I mentioned. You just go to the town's website under Documents and Reports. They're all right there for you. And I would end by noting that our community members spent 152 hours filling out this survey. And to that, we thank you, and we're very grateful. And any questions or thoughts?
I would ask that the next time we do this, we mail something out with the tax bills, so at least people are aware. I mean, we have, I think, around 10,000 voters now in Bennington, and to have had maybe 1,000 people take part, I'd like to see a lot more people get involved in the survey. People have tried hard to get the numbers up, but...
Yeah, good suggestion.
And also, it was very surprising reading the parks where over half of everybody had never been to all of the parks except one. So maybe when the weather gets better, we should focus on a park every 2 weeks, maybe on the homepage of the town website.
Yeah.
I went to a couple last year I've never been to before.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
I think most people just have never been there.
Anything else, Nancy? Did you have anything else? Sarah, do you have anything? Okay. Jim?
Just to say thank you. It was a lot of work, I know, putting it out and pulling all the results together. It was good reading. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jackie?
I certainly echo Jim's sentiments. I know what a chore it can be sifting through piles of numbers and data. So I really appreciate the visualizations and bringing some real clarity to that. The only thing I noticed that I thought was a little interesting was that we had removed the community market from the survey, and I absolutely understand why. I think it's such a fantastic resource in this community, but it then sort of surprised me to see that access to healthy, affordable food was still ranked as such a high need by so many people. So I hope we can certainly find a way to close that gap.
Yeah, it's still a high number, but it had decreased.
Yeah.
So there is perhaps a correlation there.
Great.
Yeah, thanks, Jonah. I think your survey here, I hope more people are spreading the word, shows that the doom and gloom that we seem to hear, if it bleeds, it leads, skewed a lot of people's views of this town. And the people who get involved and listen, not just to their echo chamber, would understand that the town is getting better. I think that we see that. There's always room for improvement, but I really think it's important that people understand that the best way to make this town better, in my opinion, get involved. a lot of the things that we've been discussing at our economic committee. It's surprising me, and we've had this discussion in our meetings, how much of what we feel turns out is just what the people in this town want, you know. So we, not just the select board here, but I think town staff are committed to meeting the needs of the people in this town. And I really would like to hear more from people if they have things to contribute or things they think we can be doing better. Please let us know, and we'll do what we can to get it. But yeah, the doom and gloom that I think was prevalent in our days of the drug traffickers and gun fights in the streets of Bennington, thank God, are in the rearview mirror, far in the rearview mirror, and I hope they never return. And that's all. Again, thank you for your hard work.
Ed. So I'm going to put this out there as the fact is, again, we need to enforce it. We need to, make it happen. I'm, again, very interested in just making sure that we match up the expectation to the exercise.
I think there's very definitely some useful data in here because it can help steer our thoughts on toward what we need to prioritize. And
Tom, can I interrupt you? I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
What I left off there was the $100 first year registration for property owners. And I'm jumping around, I know. What's the incentive there? If you set a date in the future that people will have to pay to register, so register before this date, and you're not subject to that, and then it goes from there.
Thanks for jumping back to a past subject.
What?
I'm just teasing.
I didn't hear you, sorry.
Yeah, definitely a non sequitur, but I would say that the probable language would be something like, within 30 days of a space becoming vacant, you would need to register it, and then the fee would be prorated for that year. And I think part of the idea of having a lower first year is you have basically 90 days before you have to call it vacant and pay that fee. That's not a huge amount of time to flip a property and get a new tenant in, so that was one thought why we don't want to punish our landowners, our landlords. We just want to get those that are egregious in this, to get them to toe the line. So that's why we felt like maybe a more reasonable first-year amount could be a better approach, because we're not trying to punish you every time you get a space gets flipped, but rather to really think about those more problem properties.
I hear you.
So as I was saying, I think that there is very good data in here that can help guide our work. I do agree that more participation would give us better data.
Although I do note that 1 out of 19.
Oh, that's still strong. But
that's a good number.
That doesn't mean we settle. And so I don't hate Nancy's idea, but I do think we need to continue to focus on reaching that rental population.
Yeah,
I don't know how we do that, but they are a significant portion of our town,
that's
and
right.
we need to hear their voices as well to hopefully help them move into home ownership one day if that's what they want to do. But so that honestly isn't even really a critique, because I know you tried, and maybe we have to think outside the box a little bit farther so we can reach those folks. But overall, I think very well done on the survey, very well done on the presentation of it. I really, really appreciate you switching it to the Likert method, because I think it gives us a much better picture than the old way of doing it, because that was kind of a little arbitrary, and this gives us some hard data. So altogether, I think we're on the right track with this survey, and I really appreciate your work on it, so thank you. Nancy.
I thought of one thing. You talked about the interest people showed in the synthetic ice rink.
Yeah.
In January 2022, on the survey on the town website, for the ARPA money, it did say skateboard park and/or synthetic ice rink. I thought originally it would be a skateboard park in the summer, and then you could use it in the winter. So I wonder how many people, but we have enough property in Bennington. We should be able to think for next year, someplace we could flood property for people to skate on.
Hey, one thing that's really neat about the synthetic ice rink, you could use it year-round. Mic drop.
Yeah, but we could have the fire department flood Willow Park, and that would be free, so.
Most
Well,
years,
ice is a challenge. This year, we've had like a picture-perfect Vermont winter, but most years, it's a little more hit or miss. So anyway, I think that's part of the logic there.
I remember when I was a kid, too, they used to flood the parking lot at the rec center. every
Well, I
year,
remember
so-
right after the high school
but-
opened, for a couple of years, they flooded the baseball field. That was the best place in town.
But we also
You take
now with
your
climate
shovels and
change have
brooms
it
after-
warming up too many days a year to
We
make
used to
it.
skate at Stark Street on the basketball court.
Yep.
Anything else from the board? Anything from the public? Jonah, thank you very much
Thank
for
you.
pulling double duty tonight. Good work. All right, next, we have review some CHIP interest forms. You'll remember last meeting, we voted to participate in the CHIP program. Shannon Barsati, people are chomping at the bit.
All right, well, switching gears a little bit, I think a common thread here is more exciting, positive things happening in Bennington. So I mentioned when we talked about the Economic Development Committee that the state is rolling out a new program called CHIP. It stands for Community and Housing Infrastructure Program. So it's just gone live in the last 2 weeks, and we already have 2 viable projects who want to submit this interest form. So this is the first step in the process. It's going to be quite a bit of work. We're going to have to put together housing development plans for each site. So we're talking about the former Energizer facility, now called Monument Place, and the Putnam Phase 2. So those are the 2 sites that are interested in this CHIP program. And the first step is the interest form, which you have in your packets. And the reason that I'm bringing it to the select board is that as I reviewed the form itself, which is just a Google form on the site, I realized that one of the requirements is to have the select board chair as a signatory. So that needs your approval as a board. It's not an actual signature, but it's essentially like a box that we check on this form. So just a little bit more background in the memo about the CHIP program. It's a new state program that uses project-based tax increment financing to invest in essential infrastructure that supports new housing development. It allows towns to access long-term financing without raising local property taxes, and it captures a portion of new property tax revenues from the future development to invest in public improvements that directly support the creation of homes. So the process is the interest form is the first step. The municipality has to submit this, even though in both cases these are not town projects. We're not developing the housing here. These are private developments. But this is a public partnership, public-private partnership, in the sense that the tax increment financing has to be approved by the select board, and then the application goes to the Vermont Economic Progress Council, VEPC, and then they have to approve that application before the deal can go forward. So this first step, we let VEPC know we have 2 projects that we really want to support with this CHIP financing, and then we have to work with those developers on this housing development plan for each site and a development agreement, which they're calling the infrastructure agreement. And that's going to break down exactly what that TIF increment is over time. It will be calculated based on the current property value and then the expected value of the property once it's developed. So we will bring that back to you when we have those agreements ready to bring to the select board. We'll have a public hearing for people to ask questions, and then we would apply to VEPC for both projects. So also the memo outlines a little bit more about each project. It's in the case of Energizer, we're talking about multiple buildings, the primary address being 401 Gage Street. It's almost 300,000 square feet of building space. with approximately 62% dedicated to housing. That's one of the requirements of CHIP, is that at least 60% of the development is for housing and for primary residences. Within the Monument Place development, there would be 160 total units comprised of studio, one-bedroom, and two-bedroom apartments. 20% of those units, 32, would be designated as affordable housing. And I think it's important to remember that in this case, and in the case of a lot of state programs around affordable housing, what we're talking about is 80% median income, sorry. And I looked it up because I couldn't remember what that exact number was. So for 2025, it gives you an idea of what affordable housing means to the state. For a single person, that's $61,000 a year, that 80% AMI. For a family of 4, that's $87,000 a year. And currently in Bennington, the last that I looked at this number, which was probably about a year ago, 53% of Bennington residents qualify for affordable housing, understanding these numbers. So I just think it's important to realize that affordable housing is essential in this community. And this program, part of moving it forward is to create more housing in general, all kinds of housing. And in both cases, it's 20% of the project is affordable housing, but that's really an important piece to be eligible for this CHIP program. So that's the Energizer, former Energizer building, Monument Place. And then the Putnam Phase 2, just a little bit more on that from the memo. That is looking at, the first phase of the Putnam was the redevelopment of the old Putnam Hotel block. And then Phase 2 is going towards the end of the street there, the corner of Washington and Main. And it's 301 Main Street. So it's 2 contiguous parcels owned by the Bennington County Industrial Corporation. The site is now vacant, and it was the former home of Greenberg's, and also Martin's, Mini Mart is there. But that would come down as part of this new development. There would be a 4-floor building on that site at the corner with 80% of the floor area for housing. And the current design consists of 79 housing units. Now that may change a little bit in the process, but that's the current design with a combination of studios, 1- and 2-bedroom units that would range between 80 to 150% median family income. And 15% of the units would be priced in that affordable range. And then the remaining 20% of the building on the downstairs floor would include a new primary care medical facility operated by Southern Vermont Healthcare and Dartmouth Health. So in both of these cases, this is essential. These are big projects, essential for more housing development. And the infrastructure that CHIP would be funding in the case of Monument Place would be a new geothermal system to heat and cool the building, which would really bring the operating costs down, because right now that huge facility is all heated with natural gas. So it would make it a much more energy efficient building. And then in the case of Putnam Phase 2, there's a number of different pieces of infrastructure that are going into that. We're talking about, for example, a bus shelter for local transit, sidewalks, curbing, a new public street, parking garage, new parking lot, and then perimeter parking around the block as well as water and wastewater infrastructure. So that is really the intent of CHIP. It's not paying for the housing units themselves, but it's helping to support that infrastructure that makes the housing possible. So that's just a quick description of these 2 projects, and I think you got to see the form is pretty straightforward. And at this point, we just need approval for Tom to be a signatory on the interest form. And if you have any more questions.
Okay, I'll start to my left again this time.
Nothing for me.
I don't have any questions. As usual, I have a comment. I think it's real important that folks listening out there spread the word. We're talking about 250 new places to live being built in our town. Not only built, but places that are tailored to meet the needs of our working folks, our workforce support here. And it's what people have been asking us to make happen, and it's happening. And also make note, it appears from what I'm reading, Monument Place, this is a personal individual's investment in our community. And my personal goal is to see a lot of folks come into our town wanting to spend their money to make it a better place for all of us. And I don't know the numbers, Dan will probably tell us, but I'm hoping this is a really good thing for our grand list.
I seemingly have questions about everything, but this one's a no-brainer to me. I think this is great.
Okay.
Jim?
Yeah, I agree that this is great, and I particularly applaud the forethought in the investment in geothermal, because that's an enduring investment that, as you said, will greatly help the operating costs and make these projects much more likely to be successful and sustainable over the long term. So kudos to that idea, and I don't know what you need from us ultimately after we get through questions to make Tom the signature, but I'm certainly in favor of letting somebody sign so this stuff goes forward.
Sarah?
Yeah. Oh, excuse me. Yeah, this is great. I think let's go ahead, let's move and put more online. This is fantastic. Excuse me. So seeing this, do you see any possibility for any of these phases and projects to have a 3-bedroom? I have a couple rentals, few rentals myself, and most people that ask or that apply are like, do you have any 3-bedrooms? I need a 3-bedroom. And they're not very large families, but they do need 3 bedrooms.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that, when we talked with M&S Development, who's leading the development of the Putnam Block, one of the hopes with this, what they've really seen in phase 1 of the first phase of the Putnam Block, is a lot of people of kind of retirement or early retirement age who are downsizing and moving into some of those units. And so that is a trend, and hopefully those houses that they're leaving, right, come back on the market. And those tend to be, 3-4 bedroom houses that are more for young families. So I do think that this market is skewing a little bit older for some of these rentals, or it's kind of both the people downsizing who are older, and then the young people who are maybe getting their, a studio apartment, right, or a 1-bedroom. So as far as both of these developments, I haven't heard as much of the 3-bedroom, just because that's not what they're seeing as penciling out.
All right, thanks.
Nancy?
After getting the packet, reading it a couple of days ago, I've spent a lot of time on the state website, reading all the details for the CHIP program. And I do not have a clue how all of these taxes getting shuffled around are going to work. We should have had a big discussion a couple of months ago so the board and the public could understand this. But as far as the projects go, the former Energizer project, they're saying it's a $35 million project. But what we need to know is what will be the assessed value on completion, what will it pay in property taxes. And on neither of these projects, it tells you a percentage of studio 1 and 2 bedrooms. You need the breakdown. And I agree with Sarah, 3-bedroom apartments. If you want young families to come here, or some people have a parent living with them, people are looking for 2- and 3-bedroom apartments. As far as the Putnam Block goes, 2 days ago was the first time I ever heard anything about Bennington having to put a new public street through that property and about a parking garage. Now, there's no costs on here. So what are we looking at for the 4-story building and the parking garage? What are those each going to cost?
Well, Nancy, like I said, there's going to be a much more detailed development plan that will, literally be able to see the the floor plans of the exact number of units, where each of the pieces on the site plan, where the parking garage will go, the full cost of the project, the financing, et cetera. That's all going to be within those agreements. So we don't have that yet. In both cases, the developers are working on those right now.
Just the site plan sounds pretty detailed, and I would have to question, is this a BCIC plan?
BCIC is the current property owner, but the developer is M&S Development.
Okay. Well, they have a very detailed plan. Somebody should have been in here a year ago showing the public. Again, I can't imagine why or where we would run a public street through the Greenberg's property.
I don't know where you're getting that, Nancy. There's been no request for us to build a public street.
It says right here, a new public street, a parking garage, a surface lot.
That might just mean a new entrance.
It's a new entrance.
A new entrance to that parking area.
Okay, but when this was announced 10 years ago, we were told a three-phase project about $20 million. It appears the project costs total are right now around $100 million. I mean, am I in the ballpark?
The project
Everything.
cost of the phase 2?
Phase 1, 2, and 3 together.
Yeah, it probably is closer to that. I don't remember what it was 10 years ago, but...
Well, they said 3 phases at $20 million. Within a year, they dropped off phase 3. It went to $54 million. But if we're talking a 3-phase project at a total of $100 million or more in Bennington, we should have been getting a lot of public information.
This is a private development, Nancy.
Yeah, it's a private development.
And like I said, it will come before the board because this is a public-private infrastructure agreement that is required as part of the application to the state. So that will all be discussed, and the developer, they actually both said, should we be at the meeting tonight? And I said, no, because this really is just the interest form to get the project, on the radar of VEPC and let them know that we are planning to work through these development agreements. But as I said, there's a requirement for public hearings. There's a requirement for select board approval. So you're going to be hearing a lot more about both of these projects.
But this says expected CHIP application filing date, May or June of this year.
That's an ambitious goal. But yeah, that if the sooner we can get an application in, the better.
Well, then there's a lot of information the board and the public will need to get over the next month and a half.
Well, no, this is just really the very most preliminary part of this whole process.
Right.
We will get more information as it becomes available, but they won't go forward to produce that information until they start the process.
Right.
But if you're filing applications in May or June, doesn't that start the process rolling?
Yes, but you still have to have, so let's say, best case scenario, we get the development plan, which includes, like all the site plans, the number of housing, et cetera, and then this development agreement or infrastructure agreement that is all about the TIF financing and how that's going to work. And then let's say we have those ready to have a public meeting in May or June. It would require your approval. Then it goes to VEPC, the Vermont Economic Progress Council. Then they review the application, they do site visits, and they have like 90 days to approve that. So, that's what the actual green light, really, we're talking the fall at the earliest.
Can I just add one thing? I think it's really important to keep in mind what this CHIP program is and what it's proposing to finance at this point, and that is basically heating and cooling system for large-scale private development that involves lots of private investment in Bennington. Right. This isn't a public project. This is a little bit that we can do to help make a major private investment successful.
Yes.
And I do want to point, sorry, Clark.
I want to start with the CHIP program, from what I understand, we're just now home. The CHIP program, my understanding is we're taking our first steps. It's a program that's only been in the last 30, 40 days even approved. So we're we're in the development phase with the developers, and the state is in the development phase of actually implementing the CHIP program. And like all situations, it's best to get in line early for a good show. You don't want to wait and hope to get a standing room seat. So my impression is we're being proactive. We want to make sure that this organization that's coming to our town to provide housing, jobs, and an expanded tax base, what we can do to get them a good place in line when things are being dispensed up in Montpelier. And the sooner we, in my opinion, the sooner we move forward assisting them in their efforts, the better results we can anticipate for our town.
That's right. There's tremendous interest in this program. I mean, I've been on probably 3 different webinars about it, and 500 people on these webinars. So you're right. If we want it to happen, we've got to get in line.
Sarah? I'm sorry.
Yeah, with that said, I'd like to make a motion to get our place in line. So I'd like to make a motion to have the chair sign the, I guess, check the box, not sign, right? The CHIP interest form.
I second the motion.
The chair has no objection. Okay, any discussion on the motion?
I missed it.
Nancy?
Yeah, I think by now we should have far more information about this, because I want to be sure with all the juggling of these different taxes, nothing's going to fall onto our taxpayers. I keep hearing it's a private project. Well, if we're talking about a $100 million project, a lot of that's grants and tax credits. Our citizens have had no say. This is a major part of our downtown.
Point of order.
Yeah.
Where are we going here?
Your points will be valid eventually, but I don't think they are for this
Well, but
particular
again, this is
discussion.
like everything else we've done the past couple of years. Everybody moves it along. And I'll say this about Energizer. I don't think all the people getting paid to do the surveys ever reached out to any neighbor. So 60 years ago, nobody ever would have let 160 apartments go in there. You've got too many people in a residential neighborhood. We've had a big problem.
Too many
with
people? Is that what I just heard? We have too many people?
This is my neighborhood, Ed.
I know,
I've lived all
I
my
know.
life.
I know.
Maybe we need to put 100-unit apartment.
We're not here debating what the use of the Energizer building is, so we have a
Oh, no,
This is
there's-
purely an
we have a
administrative.
motion on the
I
floor.
can read it right on here. But again, the people in the neighborhood never were contacted.
They will have a say when it gets to the point where
How are you
there
going
are
to have a
actual
say?
plans
The plans are
available.
all done.
The
And
plans
why
are not
did-
all done.
Why did Energizer sell just for $100,000?
Point of order, that's
That's
irrelevant.
not relevant to this discussion, unfortunately. All we're discussing now is whether or not they can check the box that the chair is knowledgeable that these things are happening, basically.
Tom, can I?
Go ahead.
I do agree with Nancy on one point, that I think we do need to see a lot more information about this. I'm really hopeful that we do get to see that information, which is why I'm in favor of this motion to allow the chair to check this box so that we can get that information.
You literally have to see the information as part of the process, so
Yes.
don't worry. There will be, all of the plans and agreements will come before the board.
Okay, anything else? Sarah?
And correct me if I'm wrong, but they have to go through DRB and every other board that we've appointed as well. Is that correct?
For certain aspects of both of the projects, yes.
Okay.
But just to be clear, housing is one of those uses that does not necessarily require DRB, depending upon what they're doing.
Okay, and we can, not all as a board, but some of us as a board, not as, we can go to those as well.
Well, you'll be able to see the detailed plans here at the board level. You won't have to go to a DRB meeting.
But if we choose to.
If you choose to, yeah.
And there's a public hearing as part of this process, so
Yes.
there will be ample opportunity for members of the public to come and weigh in on this?
Yep.
Okay.
Yes.
Thanks.
Anything from the public? Come on up.
Debbie Matt, Bennington. Is the name of that little place on the corner Martin's? Are they going to be relocated someplace else? I mean, he seems to do an awful lot of business in there, and it's a shame that he's going to be out in the cold.
Very successful for many years.
I go to Martin's almost every day. So
There's
I'm aware.
probably another spot for them, so.
But yeah, I'm sure, we have plenty of vacant properties and I'm sure we would be willing to help. So that is a valid
It's the
question.
location and it's the parking, the easy in and out.
That's valid, but
I hear there's a lot of
again, not
spaces
part of this
in Putnam.
particular conversation, unfortunately. So, anything else on the motion on the table? All right, and I will call the vote. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed?
No,
Any abstentions? All right, thanks very much, Shannon.
Thank you. Thanks.
All right, on to the manager's report.
Okay.
Mr. Monks.
Thank you very much. Couple of hopefully quick things. We're pretty much on time, so that's good. Don't jinx it. Sorry. I did receive a request from Bennington County Indivisible to close portions of River Street, Depot Street, and North Street on March 28th. On a rolling basis from approximately 12 p.m. to 1:30 p.m. for a march from River Street to the State Office Building. You'll see in the attached request that the folks are planning to gather at River Street and then march from River Street down Depot to North to the State Office Building where they would complete their march. So I know that they've discussed this extensively with the chief and the lieutenant, and I have also discussed it with the chief and the lieutenant, and they're comfortable with the plan. In fact, they worked very diligently and closely with the police to work this out. So I feel good about the coordination between our PD and these folks to make sure that this is an appropriate march location for this, what could be a fairly large march. So I would just seek a motion to approve those closures as requested.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? It's turned, I started left last time? So I'll start, Nancy.
we have public sidewalks from River to Depot, down North Street to the State Office Building. And from a safety standpoint, I don't understand putting people in the roads when they could be on the sidewalk. And I also don't understand why you'd close the road for an hour and a half when you could walk down there in 20 minutes.
Well, that's why I discussed with you that it would be a rolling closure. It wouldn't be, all these roads would not be closed from 12 to 1:30. They would begin the closure on River Street so people could gather, and then they would, once they started marching, they would reopen the roads as the march
Is that
progressed.
similar to what they do with a superhero 5K kind of thing?
Yep.
And also, I went to the website to see if they had a website to try to see if there's somebody local to contact. All it says on the website is the group was created last March. Isn't there anybody local who's an organizer that we could talk to about this?
Well, I included in the packet, Nancy, the request from the protest coordinator, so
Is
I
this
would...
somebody local in Bennington?
I don't know.
At least in the county.
Yes.
Does anybody know?
Yes.
Jackie says
She
yes.
lives in the town of Bennington?
I don't know if she lives in Bennington, but she lives in Bennington County.
Well, I just don't see putting people in the road when they can use the sidewalk. And does anybody know, are people going to be bused into Bennington for this event?
I've never heard of anyone being bused in Bennington for any event.
No, I didn't know.
Yeah. Anything, Sarah?
I feel like if Dan's met with the chief and chief is comfortable with this, I'm in favor.
Okay. Anything else?
I just had and it was related to something that Nancy asked and Dan responded to about the rolling nature of it. It seems like the most disruptive part of this is the time that North Street's going to be closed, so it's not a long distance. So I'm just assuming that North Street's not going to be closed for all that long, maybe half an hour or so.
I think half an hour would be the maximum.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think with the knowledge that the chief has been involved actually in going over and designing the route, I'm comfortable his being comfortable makes me more comfortable.
But does anybody know why you'd be in the road rather than use the sidewalk?
It would be the
That's-
sheer number of people, Nancy. There's 2,000 to 3,000 people expected.
Okay, anything else?
I just said,
Go ahead.
I think it's a Saturday morning, right? Yes. Saturday. It's a Saturday, yeah. Okay.
We'll call the vote. All those in favor of approving the road closure as requested, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No?
Any abstentions? All right. What's next?
Okay, the next one is, I think, more of a housekeeping. I've worked for the town for 28 years, and I don't think this was ever formally brought up, but I feel more comfortable making sure that the select board understands how this process works and is comfortable with me making a decision regarding tax sale properties. The statute does require that the select board basically identify an agent for purchasing properties at tax sale if the minimum bid is not reached. I know that Stuart, as town manager, made these decisions as a matter of course over the last couple of decades, and I'm assuming either the determination was made that the charter authorized him to do that, or at some point the select board gave him that authority. But since I couldn't put my hands on that, I think it's most appropriate for the board to authorize a town manager to purchase properties at tax sale if the minimum bid is not made and it's deemed in the best interest of the town by the manager. So, for instance, if a property is not purchased at tax sale and it has some sort of unique issue, like contamination, certainly wouldn't be in the best interest for the town to purchase that property, but it is my strong belief that if a property does not sell at tax sale and it otherwise is not contaminated or otherwise unsafe, that it makes sense for the town to take that property, because it's very unlikely if it didn't sell at tax sale that it would sell at the next tax sale for an even higher amount, because every year obviously taxes accrue. So I would just ask the board to formally authorize a town manager to make those decisions at tax sale regarding the properties that the town purchases.
Okay, could I hear that motion? Second? Okay. Any discussion? This side's turn. Clark.
What are we going to do with the white elephant?
So that's why we wouldn't take in a white elephant.
A property that's not contaminated, has no public hazard or anything, but just didn't sell. Once we get control of this property,
Sure.
what do we do with it?
So what we do is, unfortunately, we do have to hold it for a year because that's the redemption period. If there's a danger to public health and safety, we have the authority to go in and board it up and make sure it's safe. And at the end of the redemption period, we would then, it's been our policy, and I've talked to Jackie a little bit about this because she did come in and ask me. The current policy, though, we might want to change it. The current policy is at the end of that one-year period, we seek a sealed bid auction, sealed bid procedure. If we don't get any bids that exceed the amount the town bid at auction or at tax sale, which is the amount of taxes, penalties, and interest, then we would then go to a no reserve public auction. We can talk about whether that's the best process or not, but that's the policy the board has adopted in the past. And why that is why purchasing a property after a year redemption period is much more attractive to someone is because they don't have to wait a year redemption period. The town can give them a deed that day, and it's their property. So we have had good success in the past. I'm not going to say it's not a challenge to keep an eye on those properties during that year period, but I don't think we do ourselves any favors by letting a property sit for another year, gain more tax liability, because it's very unlikely that it would sell at a subsequent tax year. And I think we've seen good success in auctioning off properties that we've taken at tax sale.
Okay, I just want to know the process. It sounds, if it's worked in the past, I just did not want us to be saddled with a white elephant.
But your white elephant comment is very well taken, and there are properties that if there's even a hint of contamination, we're not going to be taking that property.
CTC.
For instance, CTC has been up for tax sale many times in the past. We've kind of given up on that, and the town has, I think, appropriately decided not to take that property at tax sale. So there is a certain due diligence we have to do to make sure that we're not getting ourselves into a situation that would be an expense for the taxpayer. But I do believe that if, absent those sorts of concerns, it makes sense for us to take a property at tax sale.
Thank you.
So would we discuss this with you ahead of time, or you would decide?
This is what you're basically authorizing me to make that decision. If that's not how you would like to proceed, then you could send a representative to make that decision at the time of tax sale.
Well, I'd feel more comfortable having an executive session to decide. I mean, I think in the past, there's a couple of properties we probably should have purchased that we really missed out on.
I don't disagree on that. I don't disagree with that.
I think this gives them a chance to take that opportunity if we come across something that's lucrative. Again, I believe this gives Dan the opportunity to act rather than pass on a good deal. He's kind of strike with iron's hot sort of circumstance. And I will trust the fact that we trusted enough to hire him to run this town as town manager. We should trust his judgment on these issues.
Sarah, I saw your hand.
Sure. I appreciate you coming with us to either authorize or reauthorize this. So I'd like to make a motion to formally authorize or reauthorize the town manager to purchase properties at tax sale.
That motion's already on the table.
Oh, was it? Okay. Yes. So I'd like to call that.
We have that motion on the floor, right?
Right. Yeah.
Okay. So I'd like to call that. Yeah, I'll call that, I guess, if possible.
All right, any further discussion? All right. All that happens. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed?
No.
Any abstentions? All right.
That's all I have. Thank you. And I forgot too, Sarah. So.
Upcoming agenda.
Can I ask Dan a couple of questions?
Dan, can you take a couple questions?
Certainly.
Okay, sure.
As far as the tax sales go, does somebody from the town office let the trustees in either village know each year if they have a property that hasn't paid taxes?
We coordinate our tax sales, yes. That is, as I mentioned in the last meeting, that's why we had to delay the Luxus sale, because the Old Bennington wasn't quite ready to go. It only makes sense for us to do them together so that we don't have to sell a property subject to Old Bennington taxes and vice versa. So when we can, it doesn't happen all the time, but when we can, we coordinate with Old Bennington and North Bennington. There are occasions when we.
But that's why I asked if we let the trustees know. I read in the banner, he hasn't paid taxes for 15 years. So have the trustees know?
Point of order. All of this is the responsibility of the Village of Old Bennington, not this board. Can we get back on the track, please?
And do those taxes include the penalty that they should have paid?
The amount that's due at tax sale includes penalties and interest, including attorney's fees and advertising fees for the tax sale.
And knowing at least how long one of those properties hasn't paid taxes, it would seem the taxes owed would be much higher.
Those are calculated by our collections department, and I feel pretty confident that they're accurate. Yes.
Okay.
And do we have a policy going forward? Are we going to get a list each year of all the properties that haven't paid taxes for 2 more years, where the owners haven't set up a payment plan with us?
So I'm happy to provide whatever information you would like. In this last round, I provided the properties that are going up for tax sale. Some of those have already come off because they've been paid. But any list of properties that you would like, we would happy to generate that. 1 year, 2 year, 3 years, even amounts.
Would we have 30 more properties that haven't paid for more than 2 or 3 years?
I don't know the answer to that, Nancy, but I can find out. I do believe, since it's taken us several years to deal with the new tax sale law, which is much more involved, let's just say, there has been a lag in the time that we've gone to tax sale, so there will probably be more than we would typically see. However, I expect that most of them, as they typically do, will resolve within the year period that we begin the tax sale process and then actually go to tax sale. We're down to 7 properties this year. We started off at a much higher number, and I'm hopeful that we'll be down even a couple more before we actually go to tax sale.
Now they're suddenly paying up now that the tax sale has.
We found it I found it does motivate folks, and unfortunately, and I say that not to be funny, but I think it's unfortunate. A lot of times, these folks are sitting on a property with a lot of equity, and they're paying penalties and interest where they could simply go to the bank and get a home equity loan and pay a significant lesser amount. And we try to counsel people on this, but until they actually get the tax sale notice, some folks don't make the effort to go talk to their bank and find out, oh, geez, yes, I could have a much better deal. And if I'd have gone to my bank as soon as I got in trouble, I wouldn't have incurred this penalties and interest and now advertising fees, et cetera. So it's my philosophy, we'll see if it works or not, that attacking these issues earlier will perhaps help folks from getting into too big of a hole that they can't dig themselves out of, because it is a much better route to go to your bank or family members or whoever you can and obtain a loan than trying to finance your taxes through penalties and interests that are incurring month after month after month.
And it should be reiterated that our ultimate goal here is to help folks get into compliance.
Yes,
That's the ultimate hope here. So
yeah, we want to work with folks to avoid tax sale, and that we do everything we can to come up with agreements that they can manage. We try to counsel them on how they might approach their banks and those sorts of things. So that's why ultimately when you do get to tax sale, there's very, very few properties. But sometimes you have to go through that effort to have folks understand that it's in their best interest to perhaps find another way of financing their taxes than through penalties and interest, municipal penalties and interest.
all right. So Dan, do you have anything on the docket for?
I do, possibly. Obviously, it's up to you folks. It's about time we could do one either on the 9th or the second meeting in March for a quarterly police department update. We do have to set a date for the Malone rezoning request. As you all may recall, that was part of our settlement agreement with those folks. The Planning Commission has done their part, and they are forwarding on their recommendation to you folks, so we do have to schedule a public hearing. Given the time frame, it probably would be, the earliest it could be is the second meeting in March, if not the first meeting in April, but I do want to make sure that you folks are aware of that, and we can set a time for that. We have, most of the other stuff is manager's report stuff, the Pride Parade, road closure, BBC road closures. We do have to review one policy per our review policy. Every 3 years we need to update and review policies. That we have the conflict of interest policy up to be reviewed, and we also have to almost annually approve state road and bridge standards, so we're eligible for funding. So none of those are big agenda items for the most part, except for perhaps a quarterly PD report, but those things do need to be addressed in the next month or so.
Thank you very much. Other business. Nancy.
Bennington County Meals on Wheels, we should have had them in here a year ago. Depending on what happens with the Ben High, we need to know what's going to happen with Meals on Wheels.
Okay. Sarah?
Yeah, sure. March 3rd, North Bennington, Bennington, Old Bennington. Vote early, vote often, but only once in every election.
Please do not vote often.
I'll reiterate that. Only once in every election.
Right. Jim?
I don't have anything. Thanks, Tom.
All right. Jackie?
Sarah took mine.
Clark?
As usual, thank you to our road crew. Driving in tonight, I saw the difference when I hit Bennington's area of responsibility. The roads look wonderful. Thank you guys and girls for all you do, and hopefully you'll be able to spend a weekend using some of that OT down at Walmart or something.
Clark stole mine.
I do want to say that your sentiments are very much appreciated by the folks that do that hard work, so thank you very much.
And I just want to make sure, Nancy Jeffson?
Did you talk about what you have for other business coming up?
I don't have anything
For
specifically
agendas?
scheduled at this point, but I did make a note of your Meals on Wheels discussion, and I will look into that.
I thought we were doing agenda requests. Well, I do have a comment for other business.
Okay.
We have too many people in Bennington, local residents, who haven't gotten out to vote for town meeting in March for several years. And it's important people get out. I think we have 10,000 registered voters, and we should easily have 5,000 people get out to vote this year. I'm going to urge people to defeat the town budget because this board does not have voter approval to charge our taxpayers to pay about $4 million to subsidize the Ben High over the next decade. And hopefully by defeating the budget, the voters will finally have their say. Do they want to pay for the project or not?
All right. Thank you. And I just wanted to mention that I am aware of 2 downtown businesses that had significant anniversaries this year. Madison's is on their 30th, and Harvest Brewing just this past Saturday celebrated their 10th anniversary. And if there are any other businesses that have significant anniversaries coming up, let me know and I will announce them right here. We do have need tonight for an executive session to discuss personnel. So could I please have a motion to enter executive session?
So moved.
All right. I will note that we will be making no decisions coming out. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Thank you very much.